While diplomats debate sanctions and generals calculate missile routes, there is a document that no international summit has put on the negotiating table. Not because it is a secret, but because it was written more than 2,500 years ago, and it describes the collapse of Persian power with a specificity that no intelligence analyst has managed to surpass. The name of the country in the prophecy is Elam. The territory is exactly what the world today calls Iran. Elam is not a name invented by theologians. It is not a religious abstraction created to give an appearance of depth to a convenient narrative. It is the name of a real, documented, excavated, catalogued and studied civilization by generations of archaeologists who had no theological interest in their discoveries. The first written records of Elam date back approximately 3,200 years before Christ, placing this civilization as a contemporary of the first Egyptian dynasties and preceding by centuries the Babylonia Empire itself at its peak. The capital was Susa, a city that archaeologists confirm has been continuously inhabited for more than 6,000 years. Not 6 centuries, 6,000 years. Susa is not a legend. Its ruins are located in the southwest of the territory that the world today calls Iran, in the province that modern maps record as Khuzestan, exactly the same region where the Republika Islamica built in the 21st century the backbone of its military and nuclear power infrastructure. Consider what this means in terms of historical continuity. Elam controlled, at the height of its power, access to the trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with the Iranian plateau. Its geographical location was strategic par excellence. It dominated the alluvial plains east of the Rio Tigre, controlled the mountain passes that opened the way between the Gulf Coast and the interior of the continent, and maintained relations of unusual complexity with the great powers of antiquity. Sometimes an ally of Babylonia, sometimes its declared rival, sometimes conquered, sometimes the conqueror. Elam was a power that could not be ignored even when it was defeated. The Elamites went as far as sacking Babylonia at least twice throughout their history, taking as a trophy the Code of Hammurabi, the same black basalt stele that French archaeologists found in Susa in 1892 after Christ, confirming the historical record 3,000 years later, exactly where the text said it would be. It is in this context that Jeremiah enters the scene, not as a preacher, as a first-rate historical observer living in one of the most volatile periods of the ancient Middle East. Jeremiah wrote between 626 and 586 years before Christ, the exact period when Babylonia was rising to regional dominance and the power structures of the Near East were being violently and irreversibly reconfigured. What he recorded about Elam is in chapter 49 of the book that bears his name, verses 34 to 39. There are 6 verses, only 6. And in 6 verses, this man who lived more than 2,600 years ago described with unsettling precision exactly what is happening in the Iranian territory in the present. The text is specific. Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 35, "Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might." Measure the weight of this vocabulary. In the ancient world, the bow was the long-range weapon par excellence, the symbol and instrument of a state's ability to project force beyond its immediate borders. To break the bow of Elam did not mean defeating Elam in a field battle. It meant destroying the nation's military projection capacity structurally, from the inside out, in a way that cannot be recovered in a single generation. The text continues in verse 36. "I will bring against Elam the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven, and scatter them toward all those winds. And there shall be no nation where the refugees of Elam will not go. 4 winds, 4 directions, a dispersion that reaches every nation." The prophecy does not describe a localized defeat. It describes a global-scale dispersion, a fragmentation operating in multiple theaters at the same time. The bow of Elam in the 21st century has different names. It has the name of Shahab 13, the medium-range ballistic missile with a range of 2,000 kilometers, enough to reach Israel, Arabia Saudita, Turkey, and every American base installed in the Golfo Persico. It has the name of Fateh 310, a missile that the Iranian regime presented to the world in 2022 as proof of its capacity to penetrate any defense system available on the market. It has the name of the uranium enrichment program in Natanz, where advanced centrifuges of the IR-Seiz model process fissionable material at a speed that inspectors from the Agencia Internacional de Energía Atómica monitor, with a frequency that says everything about what the world truly fears. And it has the name of Fordow, an underground facility excavated more than 80 meters deep into the solid rock of a mountain, built with a single purpose: to survive any conventional attack that any Western power could launch against it. And here is the first question that analysts rarely ask out loud. If the power of Elam was described as something that would be broken and scattered to the four quarters of heaven, why is the most advanced form of that power in the 21st century precisely a dispersed, fragmented network, operating in multiple territories at the same time, exactly like one who has been scattered by the four winds? Because there is another element of the prophecy that deserves equal attention. Verse 36 does not only say that the winds would be sent against Elam, it says that Elam would be scattered among the nations, that the refugees of Elam would reach every corner of the world. Observe what contemporary records show. The República Islámica does not project power only from its central territory. It projects power through a network of forces operating simultaneously in at least 4 countries. Hezbollah in Lebanon receives funding estimated between $700 million and $1 billion a year, according to reports from the United States Treasury Department published between 2018 and 2023. The pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, grouped under the umbrella of the Hashd al-Shaabi, number more than 150,000 combatants distributed across more than 50 distinct armed groups, each with a chain of command, funding, and operational doctrine coming from Tehran. The Houthis in Yemen, who between 2023 and 2024 disrupted maritime transit in the Mar Vermelho for consecutive months, receive missile technology, long-range drones, and operational intelligence directly from the Força Quds of the Guardia Revolucionaria. Hamas in Gaza received training, funding, and rocket technology from the Iranian regime for more than 2 decades before the attack of October 7, 2023. 4 theaters, 4 directions, a central power projecting itself through the 4 winds, exactly as the text recorded. There is another document that must enter this investigation, not Jeremias, Daniel. The prophet Daniel records in chapter 8 of the book that bears his name that he received a vision while he was in Susa, the capital of Elam, not in Jerusalem, not in Babylonia, in Susa. The vision describes a ram with 2 horns explicitly identified in verse 20 as the king of Media Persia, being destroyed by a male goat coming from the west with a single horn between its eyes. Secular historians agree that this vision describes with baffling precision the destruction of the Persian Empire at the hands of Alexandre o Grande in 331 before Christ. Alexandre defeated the forces of Dario III in 3 decisive battles, Granico, Isso, and Gaugamela, in less than 4 years. The empire that had dominated 32 nations, which stretched across 5.5 million square kilometers, which was the largest political structure the ancient world had produced up to that point, collapsed as if it had never existed. Daniel wrote about this more than 200 years before it happened. and he wrote it from inside Susa, from the heart of Elam. Susa no longer exists as a political capital, but the soil of Elam remains at the center of the planet's greatest tensions. The Bushehr nuclear power plant, the only power plant in full operation in Iran, built with Russian technology and formally inaugurated in 2011, is located exactly on the coast of the Golfo Persico in the territory corresponding to the southwest region of ancient Elam. The choice of location was not accidental. Bushehr is a port city that the Persians used as a departure point to the Gulf for more than 2 millennia. Today, on the same soil where the Elamites projected power for 4,000 years, there is a nuclear reactor that international inspectors monitor with an anxiety that clearly reveals what the world truly fears will happen there. Put into the correct perspective what it means that Iran built Bushehr on that specific soil. The decision was not only strategic in a technical sense regarding access to the sea for reactor cooling, construction logistics, or proximity to transmission lines. It was also, consciously or not, an affirmation of continuity. The same territory that projected power for 4 millennia projecting power again, now with 21st century nuclear technology. The Elamites used bows and war chariots. The Republica Islamica uses centrifuges and hypersonic missiles. The instrument changed, the geographical location of the power is the same, and the prophetic text, written in the interval between these two historical moments, describes the breaking of that power using exactly the vocabulary of the bow, the maximum projection weapon of each era. But before continuing the geopolitical analysis, it is necessary to pause here, because there is a human cost in this story that maps do not show and intelligence reports do not account for with the attention they deserve. The Iranian people are not the Iranian regime. They are 88 million people, of whom more than 60% are under 35 years of age. An entire generation that grew up under sanctions, under internal repression, under an inflation that destroyed family purchasing power by more than 40% in less than a decade. In 2022, when Mahsa Amini died in police custody and the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and dozens of other cities exploded in protests that lasted months, the world saw clearly for the first time the dimension of the abyss between the regime and the people it governs. More than 500 Iranians died during the repression. More than 18,000 were arrested. Among the dead, children. This human dimension is what the prophecy of Jeremiah touches upon when it speaks of scattering and dispersion among the nations. Because Iran already has a diaspora estimated at more than 5 million people distributed throughout the world, more than 1,500,000 in the Estados Unidos alone, concentrated in California, in Los Angeles, which the diaspora informally calls Terra Anjos. In Alemania, more than 200,000. In the Reino Unido, more than 150,000. In Canada, more than 210,000. Doctors, engineers, artists, intellectuals who left the country in 3 great waves, after the Revolution of '79, after the Iran-Iraq War in the '80s, and in a continuous flow since 2005. The human power of Elam dispersed through the 4 corners of the world, exactly as the text described. Follow the reasoning on what this scattering reveals historically. The Iran that exists today is not the first chapter of the history of this territory, it is the most recent. And when the history of this soil is put into perspective, the contradiction between what Elam was and what it has become reaches a depth that purely political analysis cannot explain. Ciro o Grande founded the Achaemenid Empire in 550 before Christ from that same territory. It was Cairo who conquered Babylonia in 539 before Christ, without shedding blood inside the city, one of the most notable military campaigns in ancient history. executed with a combination of intelligence, engineering, and diplomacy that historians still study. And it was Kiro who, immediately after the conquest, issued a decree authorizing the exiled peoples in Babylonia, including the Jews deported by Nabucodonosor, to return to their lands and rebuild their temples. The Cilindro de Ciro, found in Babylonia in 1884 and today held in the Museo Britannico in London, confirms this decree with archaeological precision. Historians call it one of the first human rights documents in history. The biblical text of the book of Isaiah calls Kiro by name, identifying him by his proper name as the instrument who would liberate Israel more than 150 years before his birth. 150 years. A prophet recording the name of a king who had not yet been born, of an empire that did not yet exist, describing what that king would do in a way that was confirmed in detail by the archaeological record. The king whom the Jews called anointed, the same word used for the kings and prophets of Israel, was born from the same soil that the texts call Elam. The contrast between that past and the present is abysmal. The country that was ruled by a king who decreed religious freedom for all conquered peoples is today ruled by a theocracy that has publicly declared the destruction of Israel as a foreign policy objective. This inversion is not just political. It is the kind of contradiction that prophetic texts describe as characteristic of the final acts of a civilization that turned away from its original purpose. And verse 37 of chapter 49 of Jeremiah records exactly that. For I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies and before those who seek their life, and I will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, says the Lord. And I will send the sword after them until I have consumed them. Anger not as an emotion, as a historical process, as a dynamic that manifests in real time, through sanctions, isolation, economic exhaustion, military defeat, and internal fragmentation. On the night of April 13th to 14th, 2024, Iran launched against Israel the largest direct attack ever carried out by one state against another state in the modern Middle East. 320 projectiles were fired. 170 kamikaze drones of the Shahed Cento E-30A type, 30 cruise missiles, and 120 ballistic missiles. The operation was designed to saturate Israeli defense systems through the simultaneous volume of threats coming from multiple vectors and multiple directions. It lasted more than 5 hours. It involved logistical coordination of a complexity that requires months of planning. It represented the largest launch of missiles and drones in the history of the regime. More than 99% of the projectiles were intercepted by the coalition composed of Israel, Estados Unidos, Reino Unido, France, and Jordania. A Bedouin teenager was hit by shrapnel in the south of Israel. She was the only recorded victim in Israeli territory. The text says that the bow of Elam would be broken. Broken, not just challenged. Broken, not just partially intercepted. And what the world witnessed that night was exactly that. The largest launch of missiles and drones in the history of the Iranian regime, intercepted almost in its entirety before touching any target of military value. 320 projectiles, one injured teenager. The bow launched with maximum available force and broken in the air before touching the ground. And here is the second question that deserves an answer. How is it explained, within any conventional analysis of military power, that the largest missile attack in the history of the modern Middle East, launched by one of the countries with the largest arsenal of drones and ballistic missiles in the world, results in a single civilian victim with non-fatal injuries? But Jeremiah does not only speak of breaking the bow of Elam. Verse 38 goes further. I will set my throne in Elam, and will destroy from there the king and the princes, says the Lord. In Elam. Not over Elam. Not against Elam. In Elam. inside the territory. The prophetic language is geographical and political at the same time. It describes a sovereignty establishing itself within that soil, an authority that replaces the kings and the princes who ruled that territory. The regime of the Republica Islamica is a theocracy led by a leader supremo with powers that concentrate religious, military and political authority in a single figure. The text speaks of destroying the king and the princes. The structure the text describes being destroyed is exactly the structure that exists there today. Measure what the nuclear program represents as the final stage of the bow of power. In February 2023, the Agencia Internacional de Energía Atómica confirmed that Iran had enriched uranium to 60% purity at Fordow. The grade necessary for use in nuclear weapons is 90%. The technical difference between 60 and 90% in terms of real production time with the IR-size centrifuges available at Natanz and Fordow is measured in weeks, not years. Specialists from the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London calculated in a report published in 2023 that Iran would have the technical capacity to produce enough fissionable material for a warhead in less than 2 weeks, if it chose to do so. 2 weeks. And at the same time, satellites show a country that cannot finance basic imports, that lost more than 80% of its currency's value between 2018 and 2023, and has an annual inflation that exceeded 47% in 2019 and passed 40% again in 2022. The economic collapse is another dimension of the fulfillment that the text recorded. The American sanctions reinstated in 2018, following the United States' withdrawal from the nuclear deal, destroyed more than 60% of the value of Iranian oil exports in less than 2 years. The Real Iraniano collapsed. The population that controls the second largest proven natural gas reserves on the planet and the fourth largest oil reserves cannot finance basic imports. More than 1,500 Iranian entities were sanctioned by Western governments between 2018 and 2024. Companies, individuals, ships, financial organizations. The isolation is structural. It is not a transitional phase. It is the contemporary manifestation of what the text called scattering by the four winds. And here is the third question that history poses. If a territory with the second largest gas reserves on the planet, with a highly educated people and a civilizational heritage of 6,000 years, is every decade more isolated, more impoverished, and more internally fragmented, what force is operating in this equation that no economist, no diplomat, and no general can identify or reverse? The four winds of Jeremiah are not just a metaphor. They are an operational description that corresponds with unsettling precision to what maps show today. To the north, the alliance with Russia and the supply of Shahed 136 drones that have been used in hundreds of attacks against Ukrainian cities since February 2022, a flow of military technology that transformed Iran into a weapons supplier for the largest European land conflict since World War II. To the west, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the militias in Iraq and Syria. To the south, the Houthis in Yemen, who blocked the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and forced commercial ships from more than 50 countries to divert their routes for consecutive weeks. To the east, strategic agreements with China formalized in 2021 in a 25-year pact, and relations with Afghan groups that remain active since the collapse of the government in Kabul in 2021. Four directions, four simultaneous theaters, a power that cannot concentrate because it is being dispersed, exactly as the text described. The text was not wrong. More than 2,600 years separate the moment Jeremiah wrote these words from the moment you watch this video. 2,600 years of empires that rose and collapsed, of borders that were drawn and redrawn by wars, treaties, and revolutions, of religions that emerged and fragmented. And in the midst of all that, the territory the texts call Elam remained at the center of the map. It remained at the center of the conflict. It remained at the center of attention for the greatest powers of every era, as if there was something in that soil that does not allow itself to be ignored, no matter how many centuries pass or how many times the country's name changes. Every round of negotiations, every nuclear deal, every Security Council resolution starts from the same premise, that the problem of Iran is political and can be resolved with politics. But what Jeremiah recorded is not a political problem. It is a written destiny. The root of what the world tries to solve with diplomacy was planted long before any modern border existed, and no summit in Vienna, Geneva, or New York has the authority to alter what was written. The world continues trying to negotiate with a prophecy, but there is a dimension that negotiators do not put into the equation. Because if the text of Jeremiah is correct about the breaking of the bow, and the night of April 2024 provided evidence difficult to refute, and if it is correct about the scattering by the four winds, and the 5 million Iranians in the diaspora, and the 4 militia networks in 4 countries confirm it, then the promise of verse 39 must also be taken seriously. Jeremiah chapter 49 verse 39, "But it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam." This line is not decorative. Within the prophetic structure of Jeremiah, it is the anchor of everything. And it implies that what the world sees today in Iran, the economic collapse, the dispersion, the isolation, the exhaustion of the regime, the young generation protesting in the streets, is not the end of the story of Elam. It is the penultimate scene. Diplomacy is not going to resolve what the prophecy described. What the prophecy described only ends when what the prophecy promised happens.